stage of this year's colloquium, and really excited to have you as a group this semester. I'm pleased and honored to present our first presenter, Dannika. So the other day I was talking to Professor VID00001. She said her daughter, Amelia, who's 13, already identifies herself as a writer. She wants to be a writer. I was so envious because when I was 13, I didn't know that I could hardly find my elbow. And she got me walking. I was really jealous. And then I realized, well, I'm actually jealous of a lot of my advisees who already identify themselves as writers. Because even in college, I didn't identify myself as a writer. And so I was especially jealous of Dannika here last year when, you know that Dylan Thomas poem, their words had forked no lightning, wise men do not go gentle into that good night because their words had forked no lightning. So her words actually forked lightning as a college student, right, nationwide. And I was envious, but in a good way, right, because my words generally can fork lightning. And so we're here today to see some of that lightning. And I'm pleased to introduce her. So.
I'm not mad at this country. You know, I'm not worried about the Negroes in the country even so much as I'm worried about the country. The country doesn't know. The country doesn't know what it's done to Negroes. But the country has no notion whatever, and this is disastrous, of what it's done to itself. They have yet to assess the price they paid, North and South, for keeping the Negro in this place. And from my point of view, it shows in every single level of our lives, from the most public.
Could you expand on this a bit, Jim, what the country has done to itself?
But one of the reasons, for example, I think that our youth is so badly educated, and it is inconceivably badly educated, is because education demands a certain daring, a certain independence of mind. You have to teach young people to think. And you have to teach young people, in order to teach young people to think, you have to teach them to think about everything. There mustn't be something they cannot think about. There's one thing they can't think about, then very shortly they can't think about anything, you know.
So I wanted to start off with that interview. That was Stud Strickle interviewing James Baldwin in 1961. And that sentence he said about education has really stuck with me since I heard it a few years ago, because I think sometimes questions come up in our heads and we push them away because we don't want to think about them, don't want to answer them. Or even parts of ourselves come up, parts of our background, our gender, our, where we're from, our religious background. Things like that come up as writers, and we try to maybe put them away. But I think what James Baldwin is saying is that if you force yourself to push things like that away, soon you're shutting all the doors to your influences, to your background, to your resources. And that's what writing has been about to me throughout college. Writing has been a central part of my education, and it has been about opening doors and saying, I am a woman. What does that mean? I am from the Midwest. I'm from Iowa. And I was raised, in church and wrestling with questions that all of those, opening those doors bring up. So I want this presentation to be about introducing my writing identity that I have discovered and hope to continue developing as I graduate and keep writing and reading. PowerPoint is going a little bit nuts, but if anyone wants to suggest why.
Can you just, if you click on the red X there,
But,
Can you control delete, so it'll take you to the task manager? Go to task manager. You might want to just end it out and then.
Thank you. Okay. Well, while we're waiting for this to work, which I think it does. That's good. I wanted this picture of James Baldwin to be up.
Give that enable editing.
Thank you. No.
Now you're confused.
You gotta do it all.
With my college education has not come. Okay. So you're telling me to click enable editing when I open it, and that'll fix the problem. Okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay. This is a photo of James Baldwin that I wanted to be playing while he was talking, but that's okay. I've been influenced a lot by James Baldwin, and I wanted to read from some of his writing, but I don't quite have time, so I thought that interview would sort of portray a little bit of his spirit. And so I'll talk about, first I'm going to read a little bit from an author that I feel has influenced me, and I'll explain a little bit specifically what that influence has been. And then, as terrifying as this order is, I'm going to read something of mine directly afterwards that I feel has been influenced by that specific author and the things they talk about. So first off is Kathleen Norris. She has lived in South Dakota. I don't know if she was born here, but she writes about the big three for me, which is the Midwest, gender, and religion, consistently, all the time. And she writes really gently and critically, if that's possible, at the same time. And I admire, this is a book of poetry, I admire her very blunt writing style that's not too formal, but definitely not, it's not Billy Collins, it's not very it's not super casual. So I want to read Kitchen Trinity for you. And this is a photo of, this is my grandma and her sisters and her mom. And they're all grew up in Iowa. Most of them still live in Iowa. Very, food-centered, bring coffee to people, bring them food. And this poem brings to mind this very Midwestern woman picture that's just always going to be a part of me as a writer and as a person. So, Kitchen Trinity. 3 women at a table hold the world. One gets up to stir the stars, one makes the fire, another blows on it to keep it going. And still they have time for play. 3 women, hunched over a cup, hands open in invitation as the table tilts in Rublev's icon. 3 angels with the same face. My mother is the tree trunk I climb, my grandmother's hands kneading bread make the table shake. Tell me the story of 3 hungry angels who appeared one day at Abraham's tent to make Sarah work and laugh. And I will be reading a poem I wrote called South Dakota in Our Hair. And as I mentioned, this is scary to read directly after Kathleen Norris, but you can maybe try to see if you can hear her influence in my writing. And it's not like I read that and directly wrote this poem, but reading her influenced me, the things I like, and I think indirectly. And I warned my mother yesterday that this is just a poem, it doesn't need to be heard literally, so. This poem is called South Dakota in Our Hair. I was drunk last night with my best friends, and Addie said, "What color do you think my hair is?" It's so in between. I took her long hair in both of my hands, and the other girls did too, and we put our eyes close to the soft strands. Addie closed hers. Someone thought that the lower layer was the darkest, brown like farm soil falling from a steel shovel. That's Addie. From her roots and the nape of her neck. We searched for colors in the top layer and shouted them out as we spotted them. Addie took each one as a personal compliment, as if she mixed the colors herself. This one is medium, like tree bark. Here's a light brown. It looks like prairie grass in the winter, matted from melted snow. Here are a few that just look like sunshine, and that's that. The way a cut-down tree shows its age in rings, her hair measured South Dakota seasons. stained in section strands and held in her hands. This is Anne Lamott, and hands down the biggest influence in my writing identity. She does write about religion, she does write about gender, but more than any way she's influenced me, it's in her style. She gives writers permission, in my opinion, to be casual, to be sarcastic, to be humorous, and still to be profound and have big ideas. And she's characteristically anxious and paranoid and terrified of any little thing that might cause sickness or pain. And but she's also very endearing, compassionate, and somehow like fumblingly graceful. So I identify a lot with her style and feel a little bit liberated by the way that she writes. So I'm going to read a little bit from Traveling Mercies, which is an earlier novel, I think. And the background to this little section, I can't read the whole thing, but she's on an airplane. And she's sitting next to a man who's reading a book about the apocalypse. And she calls herself Christian-ish. So she's very wary of this man who's reading a book about the apocalypse, and he directly asks her if she's born again, and she's like, what business of it is yours if I am born again or not? But she's also completely terrified to be on this airplane, so they've just announced that there's turbulence and that everyone needs to stay in their seats, so she's sort of having these visions of her death. And I, praying for a miracle, thought about the miracle I had seen in church. One of our newer members, a man named Ken Nelson, is dying of AIDS, disintegrating before our very eyes. He came in a year ago with a Jewish woman who comes every week to be with us, although she does not believe in Jesus. Shortly after the man with AIDS started coming, his partner died of the disease. A few weeks later, Ken told us that right after Brandon died, Jesus had slid into the hole in his heart that Brandon's lost left, and had been there ever since. Ken has a totally lopsided face, ravaged and emaciated, but when he smiles, he's radiant. He looks like God's crazy nephew, Phil. He says that he would gladly pay any price for what he has now, which is Jesus and us. There's a woman in the choir named Granola who is large and beautiful and jovial and black and as devout as can be, who has been a little standoffish toward Ken. She always looks at him with confusion when she looks at him at all, or she looks at him sideways as if she wouldn't have to quite see him if she didn't look at him head on. She was raised in the South by Baptists who taught her that this way of life, that he was an abomination. It's hard for her to break through this. I think she and a few other women at church are, on the most visceral level, a little afraid of catching the disease. But Kenny has come to church almost every week for the last year and won almost everyone over. He finally missed a couple of Sundays when he got too weak. Then a month ago he was back, weighing almost no pounds, his face even more lopsided, as if he'd had a stroke. Still, during the prayers of the people, he talked joyously of his life and its decline, of grace and redemption, of how safe and happy he feels these days. So on this one particular Sunday, for the first hymn, the so-called morning hymn, we sang Jacob's Ladder, which goes, every rung goes higher, higher, while ironically Kenny couldn't even stand up. But he sang away, sitting down with the hymnal in his lap, and then when it came time for the second hymn, the fellowship hymn, we were to sing His Eyes on the Sparrow. The pianist was playing, and the whole congregation had risen. Only Ken remained seated, holding the hymnal in his lap, and we began to sing, Why should I feel discouraged? Why did the shadows fall? And Renola watched Ken rather skeptically for a moment, and then her face began to melt and contort like his, and she went to his side and bent down to lift him up, lifted up this white rag doll, this scarecrow. She held him next to her, draped over and against her like a child while they sang, and it pierced me. I can't imagine anything but music that could have brought about this alchemy. Maybe it's because music is about as physical as it gets. Your essential rhythm is your heartbeat, your essential sound and the breath. We're walking temples of noise, and when you add tender hearts to this mix, it somehow lets us meet in places we couldn't get to any other way. Meanwhile, little by little, the plane grew steadier, and the pilot announced that everything was okay. I was so excited that we were not going to crash that I might actually get to see Sam again that I started to feel mingly. I suddenly wanted the Christian man to be my new best friend. But just as I opened my mouth, the pilot came back once more to ask if there was a doctor on board. The woman behind us, who turned out to be a nurse, got up and went back to investigate. The Christian man prayed. I tried to rubberneck, but I couldn't see a thing. I went back to thinking about Ken at my church, and how on that Sunday Renola and Ken, of whom she was so afraid, were trying to sing. He looked like a child who was singing simply because small children sing all the time. They haven't made the separation between speech and music. Then both Ken and Renola began to cry. Tears were pouring down their faces and their noses were running like rivers. But as she held him up, she suddenly laid her black, weeping face against his feverish white one, put her face right up against his, and let all those spooky fluids mingle with hers. So after that, she finds out that the plane is not going to crash, and she sort of explains a miracle that happens. She and the Christian man are sort of one in this not this close to death experience, and she calls what happened between Renola and Ken a bird-sized miracle, a very small little miracle. And this piece that I wrote is called Learning to Braid. I worked at summer camp 2 years ago in Okoboji, Iowa, and we were in the dirt a lot and the grass, and we didn't shower very often. And that has connected me to religion and the Midwest more than I ever thought it could, and has influenced a lot of my writing also. So this is Livy, the one that's not me. And again, you can try to see if you, I would love to hear that you think Anne Lamott influences this piece that I wrote, but this one is a little different. I directly tried to imitate Anne Lamott in this short. So this is called Learning to Braid. I realize every day that my girlfriends are the most important people. I think they think I'm crazy or obsessed with them, but they tolerate my daily exclamations that I love them, and mostly they don't get mad when I nuzzle their shoulders and try to hold their hands. It's because I didn't grow up with them. I was one of those girls who claim to get along with guys better, but I'm convinced that those kind of girls, ones who get along with men and not women, don't exist. They just haven't met their best friends yet. When I first decided I needed more women in my life, I was scared out of my mind. It was like I was some nervous, zitty teenage boy trying to ask the woman of his dreams to dinner for the first time. Livy was in class with me. She was kind of punky and dressed like she was from northern Wisconsin, which she was. Flannel and thread bracelets and combat boots and lots of little braids in her long hair. Braided belts and things, always very woodsy. So I thought she might be a person I could handle being around. We'd exchanged some casual conversation. When's that assignment due? And cool wolf sweater. She seemed like a person who thought hard and was a little feisty. She and I both regularly shot up hands in class to answer questions like Hermione, so we were destined to take solace in each other's in-class eagerness. I'm sure now that our classmates despise us. Her real name was Olivia, but she had told the professor to call her Livy, and I thought that was cool. My boyfriend at the time was going to be gone for the weekend, and he was my only friend, so I needed someone to be with while he was gone. I sweated all through class in anticipation. Then, as we were leaving, I said, all sweaty, nervous, "Hey, Livy, do you want to hang out tonight?" She wasn't scary at all, just receptive and casual. "Yeah, sure. I've got this hilarious indie movie I've been dying to show someone. Want me to come over after dinner?" And I said, yes, I did. I felt so scared that it would be awkward and that she wouldn't like me anymore after, because she would realize how inept I am at normal social interaction with females. She came over after dinner, and we sat really far apart on my futon and watched this obscure internet movie in which this guy with a weird voice dubs over the first Harry Potter movie with his own commentary. I laughed too loud and hard so she would know I liked the movie and was happy she was there. It was a little awkward, but she still liked me after. A few weeks later, I broke up with a boyfriend, and Livy and I got to spend more time together. One day I realized she was hanging out with me because she wanted to hear my heart and my laugh and what I think about little things like baseball and chai tea. She was different than the guy friends I had because she wasn't trying to date me or kiss me or use me for anything. She was really there with no agenda at all, and I couldn't believe I deserved that. I hadn't had any real close friends for longer than a year because they were all guys and all wanted something from me, or I wanted something from them, and when each crashed, I had to find new ones. The friendship's gone. Libby was never going to do that. We can be friends forever if we want, even after we each get married or move away from each other. I feel bad for most men sometimes because their friendships are different. And I'm sure that's what they want. Maybe that's better for them, but they don't talk like Libby and I do. They talk about ideas and people, but they don't talk about emotions. I realized I didn't have to be pretty or happy or graceful or fun around Libby, and she'd like me anyway. I could walk into her room and say, I feel selfish today and I really hate everyone from the bottom of my heart. And she would laugh in a gentle way, not a mean way, and ask me questions. She gave me this gift of freedom of identity that I hadn't known with anyone. We were eating in my school's cafeteria once and I was dominating conversation with a group of people. She leaned over and whispered, "You're being too loud." It made me so mad and hot and embarrassed for a minute, but that was another gift she gave me, a real, raw honesty that she welcomed in return. We worked at a camp in the woods this summer and she taught me how to French braid my hair. It took me so long to learn because my arms would ache from holding all my hair and I would quit and let it all fall. She showed me how to pull all my strands together and twist them in the right way so they could hold each other up. We didn't get to shower much at camp, but our matching braids, hers dark and silky, mine thick and sandy, made us feel together and beautiful. And at the end of that, this is a writing tidbit, but Anne Lamott likes to use simple, everyday metaphors to sort of tie her shorts together. And that's something that I've tried to incorporate into my writing as well. So, I would just, first of all, like to thank my professors for giving me these influences, for, saying read these books and encouraging me to write like them. And I'd also like to thank all of you for being here and listening to me. So I'd like to open up for any questions.
One of the responsibilities that all of the folks who do the English 450 colloquium portfolio have is to write according to a couple of certain forms. In particular, the literary close reading and the research paper. How are those like or not like your writing identity? And how does dealing with a particular set form, particularly a given form that you might not have chosen, the way you talk about having chosen a form like Lamott's, how does that work for you in terms of thinking about your writing identity?
Yeah, I think my writing identity goes hand in hand with my reading identity. And so I think when I have to do a close reading, I just tend to, I focus on the patterns that are in my writing too. And Dr. Cole and I had noticed that basically all my research papers follow a similar pattern. They're all about people who I think are oppressed. I have written them about Black people, gay people, people with Down syndrome, women in whatever era. But the one I included in my portfolio was in Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, which in my memory doesn't have a clear people who are oppressed. So without consciously thinking about it, I chose Malvolio, who I just think they're really mean too. So I wrote about him. So even in the types of writing that I don't necessarily choose to do in my free time, I think I am influenced by, Baldwin and Norris and Lamott and Raymond Carver and the sentiments that I've sort of gotten, the themes that I take seriously in those, I think I take seriously in Shakespeare. And so, and like every good LAR teacher will tell you, they go hand in hand, right? So.
I'm wondering, you obviously framed it in terms of your writing idea. This may be way too nebulous of a question, but I guess influences that have shaped your writing identity. And I wonder if you could speak to sort of, I guess, the distinction or the tension maybe between emulation and imitation as a way of shaping identity versus, certainly in our own culture, we tend to think of identity as something that makes me unique. That can be problematic in all sorts of ways, but I guess I'm wondering, at what point do you see your identity as a writer distinguishing itself from the influences versus reflecting the influences, or do you?
I do. I'm taking painting with CISA right now. And one of our assignments is to paint a master, to take something out of the art history book and just copy it completely. And she says that that's how people learn to paint, that that's how people have always learned to paint. And I think people can learn to write like that also. I think you have to take, it's, you know, and I'm also a theology philosophy major. You can't just say, I'm just gonna do philosophy by myself. Like you're just gonna be a bad philosopher. You can't say that, I guess. But I think naturally variation in reading, and the more I take seriously a variety of authors and influences, I think the more my own voice does come out. So, and I think that comes with editing and revision too, even with just one specific piece. The Learning to Grade piece I wrote a few years ago and did get the chance to edit quite a few times, and have sort of, I feel like as a freshman I don't believe that editing will change your paper that much, but it really did. And so I feel like even in editing and revision you find, well, maybe Amelot did this little ending metaphor, but I think it works better in this other way. And maybe that is a very specific part of each person's writing identity, is finding where they vary in voice and style and preference from their influences.
So there's one creative nonfiction piece in which you bridge your real love of writing, for lack of a better word, like intimate pieces about friendships and relationships, with another love of yours, which is baseball. And so I'm wondering if someone, do you want to write about, well, do you want to write about baseball in the future, or is that sort of another universe? And then two, if you do, if someone gave you an advance of $1 million and said, write a book on baseball, what would you write about?
I really do like baseball. I think I could, well, I would do it for $1 million, yes. But I don't know if I'm technically educated enough on the actual sport to write about, like, I could write about the poetic aspects of baseball. I could do that. I think that's all anyone would give me $1 million to do anyway. I think there are other people they could pay to write, technical baseball pieces. But yeah, that did, I guess, show up. That was another, like, baby theme. I like writing about baseball.
There's a lot of poetics in baseball.
That's true.
When you try to shape that piece, Learning to Braid, to mirror one of your favorite authors, one of your favorite writers, did you find yourself kind of getting hung up in trying to not sell them short? So you kind of wanted it to live up to what your expectation was, and was that a constant struggle, or was it just?
Yeah, it was hard because I love her and I love her writing, and it's like kind of perfect to me, And like we were talking about just now in creative writing, we just, nothing necessarily feels perfect. But I had read so much of her that I just kind of had her like essence in my mind. I wasn't necessarily imitating one specific short, and that helped, I think, because I was just, it felt good to write in the vein of someone and not like, this short does exactly this, and I'm gonna try to do it too.
Thank you very much, Danica.